address this evaluation topic. What is it that's good and bad about PEDs? And some of the things are kind of obvious, right? I mean, we've kind of referenced many of these already, looking at the individual methods or substances, but we're going to perform an evaluation today, and we're going to evaluate two things. We're going to evaluate the impact for the performer, both positive and negative. We're also going to evaluate the impact on the sport. Now, on the basis that we're going to argue that really nothing good for the sport comes from PEDs, we're only going to look at disadvantages when it comes to sport. So let's first of all think about performers. Why are they doing this? What are the negatives? And obviously we've got Chambers, we've got Armstrong, we've got Salazar. Remember, no one's saying that, sorry to put a cross on Mo's head there. No one's saying that Mo Farah was involved in drugs. As far as anyone knows, he wasn't. And we've also got Marion Jones here, who, while never testing positive for drugs, was wrapped up in the Balco investigations and went to prison for perjury for lying in court around performance-enhancing drugs. So, what are the positives? Nice and green to begin with. So, the first one is that they up arrow improve or increase performance. So there's all kinds of things we could see here. We could see chance of winning goes up. If you look at interviews with Dwayne Chambers, for example, the only reason he would argue that he took PEDs is because he wanted to win. That was his kind of a competitive instinct to do that. Maybe they want to make the first team, so maybe it's a young player trying to make the break. Otherwise, they've got to go and do some other job and not be a professional athlete. That would kind of make some kind of sense, I suppose, right? We could also be talking about a fitness improvement, improving speed, improving strength. Okay, all of these are performance gains. So that's why an athlete might go about doing this. Let me just drag down so I've got a bit of space down here. Why else might they do this? Well, people do it because they want fame. They want recognition. Okay, and being the winner in sports certainly provides that, certainly in certain sports where they're really high profile. Of course, people want to do it for wealth. Becoming the Olympic champion, becoming a world-renowned athlete brings wealth. We could say increased income, up arrow income. So people want to do better, and that's a common thread amongst all people in all sectors. That doesn't mean they take drugs to achieve it, but in this case, that's one of the options that athletes actually have. Now, lots of athletes argue that it is to level the playing field. Now, their point with this one is that other people are already taking drugs, so they've got no choice but to do the same. Now, Armstrong strongly argues that was the case for him, that it was a totally pervasive drug culture in the 90s in cycling, and he had no choice. Now, it's up to you whether you believe that or not, whether he did have a choice, but that's certainly the position that he puts forward. Let's look at the disadvantages now. Okay, so we're going to have reputational damage. So the athlete is going to be tarnished, aren't they? I mean, it's obvious. Dwayne Chambers, I don't know if you know this, but lots of people refused to go into the stadium for periods of time when he was initially came back after a ban. Lots of people didn't believe that he should go to Olympics. Lots of people tried to prevent him being in the British Championships. That reputation had gone. They could be sacked or fired. So think about especially someone who's hired by a team, a baseball player, a footballer, a basketball player. They could be sacked or fired from that role. They're also likely to be banned. Now, Armstrong's up there. He was banned for life from cycling and from athletics, actually. And we've got other people. Dwayne Chambers banned for 2 years. 2 years is the standard ban for a first offence, for example. They would also lose sponsorship. Now, again, we often come back to Armstrong with this, someone who was making huge sums of money from sponsorship, and every single sponsorship deal was lost. I remember hearing a quote from him, which he argued when he was revealed as having doped, when he admitted it, it was a £70 million loss in a single day. So that's from sponsorship, that is. Now, obviously, we've looked in the individual videos about health risks. If you haven't done those videos yet, you can go and find out all about beta blockers and anabolic agents and all kinds of stuff. And the other thing is that certain drugs are addictive. Okay, so addiction, this could be to narcotic analgesics or whatever. So people can actually get sort of hooked on these things and then in normal life can't get away from them. But what we also want to do is we want to see what damage does this do to the sport, not just to the performer. So these are all negatives. I'll use different colours to emphasise different points. But these are, guys, sorry for coughing, these are all negatives. Now, I would actually argue there is at least one positive to drugs in sport. We're not going to reference it here. And that is sport becomes more spectacular or powerful or explosive or faster. That actually, people do like that in their sport. So I think we kind of need to acknowledge that, but we're going to focus on the negatives. We're going to say, for example, reputation is damaged of the sport. Imagine if you're an elite cyclist now and the damage that had been done from cyclists in the past will lead to people not trusting you. I know lots of athletes have claimed that to be the case in sports like cycling, athletics. 100-meter sprinting is another good example. And this is exactly, athletes are treated with suspicion. Okay, so if we, I mean, I'm recording this in 2021, and the Tokyo Olympics have just passed, and you've got the women's 100-meter champion who's running remarkable times, and she will be treated with suspicion, just like Bolt was previous in the male side. So, you know, I'm talking about Elaine Thompson-Hara, by the way. So these sorts of athletes will be treated with suspicion. Presumably, they've done nothing wrong, as far as we know, but they're treated that way anyway. The sport could lose its own sponsorship. So, of course, if a sport is sort of tarnished with drugs, fewer sort of companies are going to be interested in getting involved with the image of that sport. We can go further as well. We can also say that they would have fewer spectators. You know, effectively, spectators, apart from the participants, are the lifeblood of a sport because they invest money, right? So that's absolutely critical that if that goes away. We could also have a reduction in participation levels. You know, the sport becomes seen as dirty, and people don't want to be part of it anymore. That means that the levels in the future drop, and fewer elite athletes of the quality required make it to the top. And then finally, guys, you've also got the sport itself. It needs to invest. So it's going to cost money for the sport. And why does it cost money, this doping thing? Because they have to produce anti-doping systems that are highly advanced, highly technological, and at least match the pace of the development of the drugs. So these are the reasons why it's negative for sport. And just to remind you, these are the reasons why it's both positive and negative for the performers. Look out for those wordings in the questions that you're asked to answer. Thanks.